Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Politics. Now, right off of the bat, I need to say a couple of things. Number one, this program is not one that children should watch or be listening to because I'm going to be a little bit graphic, and I don't want children to be around, but it needs to be done. Secondly, if you've followed me for any amount of time, you know that when you read the description and you saw the exclamation point before the sentence, that is an indication that whatever's listed there is not what we're going to talk about. We are not going to talk about women's issues. Okay. We are going to talk about what society likes to call women's health. It's not that at all. I'm going to call it what it is. It is abortion. It is murder. Okay. Now, the reason that I wanted to do this program, this is the week that New York mayor signed into law that in New York it is legal now to get an abortion all the way through pregnancy, up to and including during the birth. Virginia, late in the week, proposed that governor, who's also a Democrat, proposed legislation where a baby could be born, make the abortion legal all the way up to its death, and then some. And here's what it would do. And the governor was on TV describing this event. The baby would be born, resuscitated, if that's what the mother wanted, laid down and made comfortable, and then a conversation would ensue between the mother, the doctor, the father, and they'd have this confab. And then if they wanted to abort the baby, then they would kill it. It did not pass, but it did not pass by one vote. They came within one vote of making that legal. Now, for you millennials and Gen Zs that don't know the history, I lived through the history of Roe v. Wade, and I want to give you a description so that you know what's going on and you can understand why the left is so paranoid about Roe v. Wade and why these governors are overreacting. Now, back in the late 60s, when the hippie movement was around and there was all this free love going around, there was a lot of pregnancies going on. And women and doctors were trying to give themselves abortions with coat hangers, and women were getting hurt and killing themselves accidentally. I mean, there was a lot of, so they decided that they were going to try to get abortions legalized. And they went to courts. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was a case called Roe versus Wade. And when the arguments were made, the major argument was not about abortion. The major issue was, when did life begin? And there was two arguments. There was the Christians who said life begins at conception because God says so. And the secularists were saying life begins at birth. You know, when the doctors smacked your bottom and you started crying, that's when life began. Up until then, they didn't think life was there. Now, remember, this is back in the early 70s, and medicine was woefully behind where we are now. There was no sonograms. There was no way to hear a baby's heartbeat. So this really was a theoretical discussion. And they were discussing not the concept of snuffing out a possible life if left to term. They were basing their decision on at what point does life begin. If it begins at 10 weeks, then if you aborted it at 9 weeks, you weren't killing it. That was the logic that was going on. Well, they didn't want to try to narrow it down to a number of weeks. So what they did is they then had to say it's either the beginning or the end. It begins at conception or at birth. Nothing in between. So for 9 months of development, there was no life, or it was all life. That was the debate. We had a liberal Supreme Court at the time, and the press at the time was still incognito as a neutral press. They were not, of course, but the American people hadn't caught on. Some of the politicians knew. Richard Nixon in the early 70s knew that the press was against Republicans, and they were liberal, but the American people didn't. So when the press reported on this case, the press, of course, took the secularist position of life begins at birth. So all of the articles that they wrote, all of the positions they took, all of the politicians that they covered, all had this. So the American people were pretty much, with the exception of the Christians, backed Roe v. Wade. So the decision came down that you could have abortions. And I don't remember the specifics. They may have put, weeks, in there. I don't remember. But anyway, at that point, abortion was made legal. It was in the early 70s, 72, I believe. Now I'm going to come forward a bit, and then I'm going to go back. Okay, so now let's look at it from today. The situation now is, we know because of technology that birth begins at conception, just like God says in the Bible. We know that there is a heartbeat after X amount of weeks. We know that babies can feel pain. We can see a heartbeat because of ultrasound. We can watch the baby move and kick. We can see the baby formed in the mother's womb. And we can see this all the time because of sonograms. We can see so well inside the mother's womb that doctors can do surgery on the baby inside the mother. That's how much technology has come forward. So now we know that there is no question at all that life begins at conception. That's what scares the Democrats. If they go back to the Supreme Court and they have to rehash this argument, now it won't be a debate. Life begins at conception. Therefore, if you kill something then, it's murder. And there's always been this double-edged sword that the Democrats never want to talk about. Okay? They want to argue, A, that it's not a baby until it's born, but B, if the mother is killed and she's pregnant, it's now a double homicide. It is illogical. It makes no sense at all. And yet the Democrats are fine with that. And nobody wants to hold them accountable. Now, right-wingers will bring that up, but they never push them for an answer. Now, let's look at their position now. They got Roe v. Wade by saying that life begins at birth. Okay, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say that they're right. That would mean that the governor in Virginia wants to kill the baby after life begins at birth. Remember what he's wanting. The baby would be born, resuscitated, made comfortable. A conversation would happen about what to do with the baby, and then she could elect to kill it. Again, that makes no common sense with their original argument that life begins at birth. Just like it makes no logical sense if life begins at birth, how can it be a double homicide if the pregnant mother is killed? See, the different shapes of a pretzel they have to turn themselves in to believe the garbage they're trying to peddle. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the different ways that you can have an abortion. The doctor can take forceps up into there and chop the baby into pieces and pull them out piece by piece. He can insert saline and kill the baby inside the womb and then pull the baby out. He can crush the baby's skull with forceps and pull it out. Depending on how far along the birth is, there are several different ways to kill a baby inside the mother. Very, very gross. Now, after Roe v. Wade got legal, the Democrats immediately turned that murder of babies around, and that argument now becomes about mothers' health. Completely ignoring the fact that it was a baby. The big saying for the last 30 years has been my body, my choice, right? That's wrong. Baby's body, your choice. It was your choice to jump into bed and get pregnant. That's your choice. If you're going to abort your body, then you would be committing suicide. But if you're going to abort the baby that is inside of you, it's not your body. For you to decide to do that, you are playing God. Abortion is not family planning. When the Democrats won Roe v. Wade, there was a full court press on how they were going to present this to the American people and the litmus test for Democrats to get elected. This became, today it's not so much, but I promise you that through the 70s and 80s, this was a litmus test for Democrats. If you weren't pro-life, you couldn't be a Democrat and get elected. There were some, and there's still one or two today, but they didn't get any help from the Democrats, the main machine. The litmus test, and they didn't care about what you thought about Keynesian economics. They didn't care about what you thought about the southern border or the military. The only litmus test was, are you pro-life? Or at the very least, pro-choice. If you were not pro-choice, you could not be a Democrat, period. They took Roe v. Wade and they turned that to where it became about women's health. And that they took the verbal argument and made that about pro-choice. Now, and here again, when I said full court press, they took the term abortion, which means to kill the baby, and they turned the phrase, again, look, think about all the turning they're doing, and they turned that phrase to pro-choice. Everybody wants choice, right? If I go to a hamburger joint, I want to have the choice whether I want a single, double, or triple. I want a choice. That's not what this is about. It's not a choice. You're either pro-life or pro-death. But they turned that phrase and they made the American people buy it. Now you had to be pro-choice. If you were a conservative Christian and you were pro-life, no matter how much we used the term pro-life, the Democrats painted us as against women's health. That's why the majority of the women moved to the Democratic Party, because they even convinced the women that killing their babies was a women's health issue. That's the biggest lie that Satan has ever came up with from the pits of hell to change a society, was to make their their own mothers think that killing their babies could rightfully be called women's choice, health issues. That is a lie straight from the pits of hell. Now, just as an aside, the reason that I didn't put abortion on the front title is because I know very well, as a conservative, whenever I do programs and I list them as to what they actually are, they always get put off the air. I did one a year or two back, well, a little while longer than that, and it was called Marriage, : It Ain't. And I was talking about homosexuals. They canceled that program. I couldn't link to it. I couldn't cut and paste. Even the people on that site couldn't get to it. I tried. So they do censor when they know what the content is. So if it gets out, this show will be that way. But I'm not going to be silenced. You know, the left always has the opportunity to talk about pro-choice and Roe v. Wade, and they get to talk about it in terms of the nasty, evil Christians. But when the conservative Christians use the same opportunity to talk about pro-life versus pro-death, or those nasty left-wing liberals, we get shut down. But that's not going to keep us from talking. I believe that abortion and Roe v. Wade was one of the beginning points of the downward turn of our society. There were several key markers along the way. Abortion was one. Homosexual marriage was the last big kick in the teeth. And now I think that the liberals have gotten society to where they want. I think now they're going to start on the infrastructure of the government. And I think they're making good headway. But as they turn their attention away from that, we as conservatives, we need to take back the social constructs of our country. As Christians, we know that abortion is murder. We know murder is against what God says and what God teaches. We know that to be true. It is therefore beholden upon us to not only know it for ourselves, but to influence our society that we live in so that we can get our society back to a godly society. I can't tell you how many Christians I've talked to, and I would ask, how can you vote Democrat when the Democrat is pro-murder? And they say, pro-murder? I say, yeah. I said, do you believe if you're voting Democrat, you're pro-choice? And without error, this is the answer I get. Well, I think everybody should have their own choice. I personally am against abortion, but everybody should have be able to make their own decision. I shouldn't make that choice for them. Okay, that is the biggest cop-out I've ever heard. When somebody tells me that answer, here's what I hear. I'm hearing, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to push my beliefs on them. If they want to kill their babies, that's okay. All right, well, let me ask you this. If I said, you think you're the God of your own space and you want to be able to make your own choice of whether you want to kill your baby or not, right? Yes. Okay. Then I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to kill you. What? Well, I've decided that in my world, I'm going to be God and I don't need you. So I'm going to kill you. I don't want to take care of you. I don't want to pay Social Security for you. And I really am not interested in paying for food stamps for you. So I'm going to kill you. And that's pro-choice. I want that choice. Just because you want the choice to not have the responsibilities of a baby does not give you that right. And just because the court says it's legal does not make it right. In Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler got it through the courts and approved by the courts that Jews were not human. Just because it was legal did not make it right. Jews, of course, are people. But it's a lot easier to kill somebody when they're not a person. And guess what the left did to babies in the womb? They had them declared not people, therefore they have no rights. You see this? You see the similarity? Hitler got stopped because enough of God-fearing people got together and decided what he was going to do wasn't right. The United States did not want to get into World War II. If the Europeans want to kill themselves, let them do that, but we want to stay out. Thank God we got in, because if we hadn't, we'd all be speaking German right now. It was that close. The same is true in our society today. Legally, babies are not people. They have no rights. Therefore, we can kill them with impunity, and it's legal. Now they're trying to extend that out, not just while they're, up to a certain number of weeks, but all the way up till they're being born. Now, I remember in the early 2000s, I got a phone call from a senator's office, and he was trying to get me to agree to sign a petition to end partial birth abortions. And I did not know what that was. And they explained it to me. And here's another graphic part. At that point, what they were doing is they would let the mother go full term and deliver the baby head first. And as the head came out, the doctor would slit the throat of the baby and let it bleed to death. And that was legal. This specific, and I don't remember who it was, but of course I signed and I agreed to help, and I did all I could. Partial birth abortions, as far as I knew, was illegal. So now New York comes along and they want to do this thing. It's the same version of partial birth abortion, only now what they are saying is, as the baby is coming through the birth canal, instead of slitting the throat, the doctor can now take forceps and go up in there and crush the baby's scalp and kill it, and then pull the baby out. Absolutely barbaric and disgusting. Now, so we now see how Roe v. Wade was turned from abortion to women's health care. We see how they took the term abortion and murder and turned that phrase to mean women's health care. And the left was very successful. The majority of women now vote Democratic for that specific reason. And they still play that card. I wish women would wake up and understand that it's not your body, your choice. It's baby's body shouldn't be your choice. It should be baby's body, God's choice. But the left has brainwashed you. Now, as we have that's basically a brief history of abortions up to this point. I mean, there's been others. I mean, the RU224 pill or something, the day after pill, which separates the baby from the uterine wall, and that's an aborted thing. But the fact of the matter is, no matter how you do it, abortion is murder. And you can call it rose petals if you want to, but it's still murder. And just because it's legal does not make it right. For all of those women who claim to be Christian and have not confessed the murder of their babies, they will answer to God for that. They can still receive forgiveness. They need to confess that they murdered their babies. Now, back in the day of Jesus and before, Jews who had gone off of the reservations and worshiped other gods would sacrifice their babies on the altar to a god. I believe his name was Malik. I'm not positive. But anyway, they would sacrifice the lives of their babies. God called that detestable. How could you do that? But they did. So today, when women are sacrificing their babies, we call it abortion. God calls it sacrificing on the altar of blank, fill in the blank. So if you're a female, you've had an abortion, you sacrificed your baby on the altar of convenience. You sacrificed your baby on the altar of education. You sacrificed your baby on the altar of age. You sacrificed your baby on the altar of immaturity. You sacrificed the life of your baby on the altar of fill in the blank, whatever your reason. There is no good reason to kill a baby. None. So now when the conservatives try to make this argument, now the women, and this is not the majority of women, this is what Rush Limbaugh calls the feminazis. These women are just out there, they are men-hating. And one of the arguments is, you want to get rid of Roe v. Wade because you want to control women and the babies. You want to control everything. No. And here's how I can prove that. For anybody that's been alive for any amount of time, we as men, I don't know how women view it, but we as men all know one thing. With the exception of rape, women always make the choice about sex. Always. I have always said that as women and a society goes, so goes society. Women make the choice before conception. Without the women getting pregnant, there is no decision to be made about controlling women or controlling babies or controlling their health or controlling anything else. The women make the initial contact. They make the initial choice. If you don't want to feel like you're being controlled by laws or by men or by anything else, then don't get pregnant while you're single. It's that simple. God made the rules very simple. You twist yourself up into a pretzel trying to justify the things that you want to believe. You want to believe in pro-choice because you like your sin. If sin wasn't fun, it wouldn't be a problem. Everybody likes to have fun. But God made it very simple. Don't get pregnant, don't have sex before marriage. And then when you do, you and your husband do it in a godly way to honor God. Before marriage doesn't honor God, and that's why we have abortion. Do you think married women have abortions? Not if it's with their husband. 99% of abortions are done by single females. Now, here's an argument that you never hear women make. They claim that white men wrote the laws, white men control the doctors, white men control the abortion. Well, if I contend that women make the choice of having sex up front, they make the ultimate first choice. Now, based on what the governor in Virginia wanted to have done, if you kill the baby after birth, that's not abortion anymore. I mean, again, you can call it rose petals if you want to, but now it passes from abortion, which is murder, to infanticide, which is murder of babies. It's not abortion anymore. They are making infanticide legal. Now, let's project this out another 40 years. Let's say that law passes and that baby can be made comfortable and stay there for 2 days, and then they can elect to kill it. Okay. And everybody buys that. And we debate that for the next 20 years. And in 20 years, they want to extend that to a week. And then the next year, they want to extend it to a year. Then the next year, they want to extend it to 5 years. At what point does infanticide stop? I mean, murder is murder. Whether you do it the third or the second trimester inside the womb or the third year, the third birthday after they're born, it's still murder. And that's the logical conclusion where this is going to go. The Judge Kavanaugh hearings became a zoo because the Democrats are scared to death about going back to the Supreme Court and refighting Roe v. Wade. They know as well as I know that if that goes back to the Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade will be overturned. If it's not, it will be a travesty. There is no question at all. If women claim that men want to control babies and women and all of that, how come when it's women's health, how come when you go to get an abortion, they don't require the approval of the male? You know, they say women's my body, my choice. No, not really. I mean, if you want to use that logic, it would be my body, our choice. It took two people to get you pregnant. How come one person gets to make the choice? Again, it's the female that is taking control of every decision here, and the male is left out. She's the one that chooses to have sex up front. She's the one that determines whether or not she wants to have the baby. And she's the one that determines whether or not the male in the situation even knows. And she's the one who determines whether the male is going to have any input into having an abortion or not. From my viewpoint, the women are making all of the decisions and the men are left out. There's no control about men controlling women and babies. That is a straw man argument set up to keep the men's voice quiet. This whole thing is about murdering babies and keeping everybody that has any other decisions input into it, keeping them quiet and on the sidelines. And then the whole other argument, once you accomplish that, all you have to do is convince the females. The males are left out, so half of your argument is gone. If you can convince women of that, then the argument becomes very simple. Now it's a one-on-one. Do you think, okay, from everyday experiences, most women get their, or used to anyway, get their pills from Planned Parenthood when they're young, right? Would you agree with that? Middle and upper class people may get theirs from their gynecologist with their parents' approval, but the majority get them from Planned Parenthood or the government of some sort. Do you think that if they go in there and get that, do you think they're going to talk about pro-life or pro-choice? Well, Planned Parenthood makes a majority of their income from performing abortions, so they are definitely not going to talk about pro-life. They're going to talk about you have a right for abortion. If the pills don't work and you get pregnant, you can always come in and get an abortion. They will never talk about adoption. So the whole situation, the whole abortion, female health issues is all designed to isolate the female and for everybody around that is around the female, which is the government, Planned Parenthood, free clinics, the press, everybody around that female is to control the input. So it's like a gang war on one female at a time to get them to get an abortion. That's how it's done. That is what has changed our society. The left wing is pro-death. The press is pro-death. Planned Parenthood is pro-death. The free clinics in the inner cities are pro-death. There is nobody in the average female sphere that is pro-life except those nasty Republicans and conservatives and those nasty evangelicals, those nasty white privileged males. Keep them out, and let's isolate that female so that the only input that she's getting is from the people that all want pro-death. That's where we are, and most women don't see that. They know there's people out there against abortions, but they think it's all conservatives. They think it's all Republicans, and that's why they're voting Democrat. They don't see the whole picture. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what argument can they possibly make to justify abortion? From the medical evidence that I have seen and heard, most OBs who have vast experience in delivering babies have all said there is no reason at all physically to have an abortion in the third trimester to save the woman's life. Now, there are situations where they can have a C-section or they can induce labor, but there's no reason to have an abortion, none at all. So the argument that abortion should be legal to save the life of the mother is another straw argument. No logical sense, no medical logic to that argument at all. So take that one off the table. What other could they have? Well, there's a whole list of arguments that we used before that they sacrificed their baby on the altar of. You have to take those off of the table because that is about their convenience. It's not about the babies. So what argument can they use to justify abortion? Okay, let's say that the baby is deformed. Is that a justification to kill a baby? If you say yes, then the logical output of your argument is that everyone that has a physical deformity should be murdered. That means everybody that has cerebral palsy, everybody that has Down syndrome, everybody that has any physical deformity, one leg longer than the other, one eye, one ear, no arms, no hands. All of these people have to be killed. Actually, that is exactly the logic that Hitler used because he wanted to have the superior race. So anybody with any deformities were killed. If you kill everybody that has any deformities, now you're killing millions and millions and millions of people. And guess how many people have been killed in abortions? 350 plus thousand every year for the last 50 years. You do the math. It's lots of millions. But is that a reason to kill a baby? I don't think so. If you believe that, then you believe that it's okay to kill everybody else that's in wheelchairs. So what possible argument can they use to justify an abortion? There is none. I'm not ready to be a mom. Okay, then you shouldn't have been ready to go to bed. I don't have the money. Well, you should have thought about that before you jumped into bed. These are all excuses about you. This is not about the baby. Those might be excuses for not going to college, or not moving out on your own, or to buy a car. These might be reasons for those things, but it's no reason to kill another human being. There is no argument for abortion that makes any sense that has to do with the baby. And that is why the left turned that argument and called it women's health. It has nothing to do with women's health. It has everything to do with justifying killing a baby. I, for the life of me, cannot understand. Well, I mean, I understand, but I don't understand the logic. How the federal government gives millions of dollars every year to Planned Parenthood, who kills babies. Now, as I record this on a Sunday, it was announced that just today, Donald Trump signed an executive order outlawing the government to give any money to support abortions, which I've covered this, and it sounds good and it's a good press bite, but Planned Parenthood is already prepared for this. They've divided their company into two parts. One is for abortion and one's for women's health. They'll just change it to Women's Health Department and they'll still get the money. It's sleazy and it's grimy, and they've already gone down this road. But how can the federal government justify giving money to Planned Parenthood, period? They are killing American babies to the tune of $335,000 a year, and the federal government is paying them to do that. Now, they might not say that, just like I said, they might give it to the Planned Parenthood Women's Health, but that would be like me opening a company. And on this part of the company, we sell dog food. Dog food's a good thing. On this side, we steal and murder horses to make the dog food. Well, that's a bad thing. And the government says, well, we're not going to give any money to any company that kills horses. Okay. So you give the money to this company, which I still control. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Planned Parenthood is still going to get the money. Just because you write the check to company A instead of company B does not mean that the head of both companies is not going to get the money. Why are we supporting that? Would we give money to a company or to a country? Let's say China. If China had a policy of killing every American that came into their country, would we give them money every year to do that? I don't think so. And if we did, shame on us. I say shame on the American government for giving a penny to any company or any company that kills American babies. Why are we tolerating that? Now you have to ask yourself, how did it come to be that Democrats were on the side of Roe v. Wade and Republicans were against it? I mean, we know that that's where it's at, but how did we get there? What makes the two parties fundamentally different? Do you think they just tossed a coin and decided, yeah, we're going to be for, you be against? No. There is a strong fundamental reason why the Democrats are for murder and the Republicans are against murder of babies. Do you know what it is? The Republicans always win elections based on ideas and ideals. Democrats always win elections by being negative. If you were to take a piece of paper and write the positions of Democrats and Republicans side by side and go down a sheet of paper, they will all have one thing in common. The Democrats, every stand they take is against God's word. Every stand the Republicans take are with God's word. Without exception. Just go down the line. Abortion, killing babies. Democrats for or against? For. Homosexual marriage, which goes against God's word blatantly many times over in the Bible. Democrats for or against? For. We have a God-given right, based on our Constitution and in the Bible, to defend ourselves with arms. Democrats for or against Second Amendment? Against. Every stand that they take, if it has anything at all to be against God's word, the Democrats will always be for that. I'm not picking on Democrats. I'm really not. I wish it weren't that way. I wish we as Americans could agree to be against the murdering of our own babies and come together and outlaw that stupid, barbaric law together. That's what I wish. But when you understand where the Democrats and the liberals want to take this country, they want to take us to a socialist form of government. Every socialist form of government has one common thing in common. The government becomes God, and God is outlawed. That's why in every communist and socialist country, religion is either eliminated or highly, highly regulated. Without exception, because the government wants to be the God. They want to make every choice and every decision and be in charge of every part of everybody's life. And they can't do that if God is the central part of their life. That is why the Democrats are for murdering babies and Republicans are against. If you doubt me, I want you to go and Google the 2008 Democratic National Committee when they nominated Barack Hussein Obama for president. Because in that committee, the speaker got up on the floor and he was talking to the delegates and he said, well, we're drawing up our party platform and we have not mentioned God in here. Should we mention God? And he got booed. God got booed by the Democrats. You'll never see that on Republicans, ever. The last 3 Christian presidents we've had have all been Republican. The last 3 Democrat presidents we've had have all been godless. Now, all 3 of them claim to be Christian. Jimmy Carter claimed to be Christian. But I have followed him very closely. He has some really warped beliefs about Christianity. As an example, he says God will accept homosexuals into heaven. No, he won't. And it's very plain in God's word. Bill Clinton, he may have gone to church every Sunday, but I got news for you. He was no Christian. He did not have Jesus in that church. He's not a Christian. Never has, never was. Barack Hussein Obama sat in a Baptist church underneath Jeremiah Wright. And I'm not going to repeat the lines he's used, but if you want to see what Obama calls Christianity, look up, Google Jeremiah Wright, listen to some of his preaching. He's no Christian by any stretch of the imagination. And you can go all the way back through history. It's the same. Democrats are anti-God. Republicans are pro-God. And if you ever use that measuring stick against any stand that any party takes, and you will always be able to pick the Democrat stand. Always and without exception. Now, they always want to have legislation for abortion. And if they can't get legislation, then they want to get the courts. Okay? If that is just about women's health, okay, because that's the new mantra for the left, women's health, okay? Well, then I've got a question for you. How come they're not clamoring to have court cases or legislation drawn up for breast surgery? That's a women's health issue. I'm not aware of any legislation or any court case at all that says that the government has to fund that. What about cancer treatments? That's definitely a women's health issue, and I would agree with that. Why is there no legislation written that that's a right and the government has to pay for that? What about sex changes? There's no legislation written up that that's a right. Now there has been policy made, like in the military under the godless Obama, that let transgenders in so that the military would have to pay for their stupid operations. Trump just ended that, by the way, and the court upheld him. If it were truly women's health, wouldn't we be funding adoptions instead of abortions? That way it would be a women's health and a baby's health issue. There's no legislation on that. There's no court cases saying the government needs to pay for adoptions. Why? Why is it only the killing of American babies? Why is it only that specific instance that the left wants to call women's health issues, and they want to get legislation on it in New York and Virginia and other states, soon to be Vermont, Rhode Island? I don't see anybody clamoring to make the government pay for adoptions. Why? Isn't that a woman's health issue? If she carries the baby to term, there's no operation. That seems more healthy than having an operation. I would prefer the government help to pay for adoptions instead of abortions. And that is definitely a women's health issue, but the left wants women's health issue to be limited to abortions. And I don't understand why. I mean, I do. But the American people aren't asking that question. Now, the answer is because, remember, they want that female isolated so that the only input she's getting is kill your baby, kill your baby, kill your baby, kill your baby. If you add in their adoption, now they have to have that argument with that female about kill your baby versus save your baby, kill your baby versus save your baby. They don't want to have that argument because they know, as well as you and I know, that once that argument happens, 8 or 9 times out of 10, the mom's going to choose adoption, because once she looks at the sonogram and sees that that is a fully formed human baby, most women don't want to kill that baby. But they can't pay for the adoption or the surgery. But what if the government came in and said, okay, whatever you do, we're going to pay for it. If you get an abortion, we'll pay for it. If you get an adoption, we'll pay for it. The left doesn't want to have that discussion. See what I'm saying? It's not a women's health issue. It's a political control, keep the women's voting for Democrats issue. That's what it truly is. Now, here's the biggest eye-opener that I've seen in the last 2 weeks as this issue has come up in New York and Virginia and a couple other states. The press has been pushing this narrative now, not negatively and as positively as you can. They've been covering it. But here's what I've noticed. Not one Democrat has come out and spoken against these policies. Not one. Not Chuck U. Schumer, not Nancy Spitbucket Pelosi, not Spartacus, not Dickless Durbin, not one Democrat has come out and spoken against the infanticide proposed and almost passed, missed by one vote in Virginia. Not one Democrat came out and spoke against the infanticide that is going on and that is now legal in New York. And do you know that when that legislation passed, Hillary, or Killary, which is an appropriate name in this instance, Killary Clinton, was there waving her arms in victory, laughing and smiling and celebrating the fact that now that they can kill a baby as it's being born. Yeah, that's something to cheer about. And not one Democrat, not one, nationwide, not Kamala Harris, not Beto O'Rourke, not Barack Obama. Nobody, not one Democrat has come out and said, hey, you know, killing a baby as it's born is kind of crude. The hell are you people? That baby is a live, viable, heart-beating, soulful human being. And you're celebrating because now you get to kill it as it's coming out of the woman? Have you lost your damn minds? Not one Democrat's come out and said that. Republicans have, including our president, but not one Democrat. I want you to think about that. Especially you millennials and females. I want you to think about this. I've given you the history of how we got to where we are. I'll bet you most millennials don't know that. The argument of how we got here and why the Democrats are for it and Republicans are against it. I'll bet most millennials don't know that. I'll bet most females don't know that they have been brainwashed by the left to be in this little ball, so that the only information you're getting is from all the pro-death people. And everybody that's trying to reach you is being vilified by these people, the press, the left, the government, the abortionist. Everybody that you're being surrounded around is bad-mouthing the people that are standing outside the abortion clinic with signs. Those are the bad people. The conservatives and the evangelicals, those are the nasty people. Those are the evil people. And you're being told that, and you've been believing it because you've been voting Democrat for women's health issues. And again, I say, if you're a female and you think that I'm wrong, and you think this really is about your health issue, ask yourself this: how come the government doesn't pay for breast surgery, or for cancer treatments, or for sex change operations, or for adoptions? Those are all women's health issues, and the government hasn't had anything to do with any of that. The only one they're concerned about is killing babies, and you got to ask yourself why. When you answer that question, go back and I told you it has to do with God. Then you go back and you look at all the other beliefs that these leftists have. And if there is a pro-God and an anti-God choice on any issue, the Democrat will always be on the non-God issue. And if you're fine with not having God anywhere in your life, then you've made the right choice. But if you're walking around there thinking that the government really cares about your health issues and you claim to be a Christian, you need to re-examine your issues. If you're a millennial and you don't know the history of abortions, and you don't know, you can't explain or verbalize why the Democrats are pro-death and the Republicans are not, if you don't know the answer to that, you shouldn't have an opinion. Do your research. Now, this is the only issue I wanted to talk about today. And the reason is because there are certain issues, in my opinion, as I said, that are God issues. And this is one of them. And every one where God is involved, the left has won in the last 50 years. And it makes me furious. I get really, really irritated and really, really passionate when I talk about what is plainly and obviously anti-God and the left glorifies it. And the right is too weak, too scared, too intimidated to stand up and say, what the hell are you thinking? At what point in your life did you wake up and decide, hey, I think it's okay to kill babies? Or, hey, I think it's all right for men to have sex with other men. At what point did you wake up and say that was all right? Oh, I see. You take the wussy way out by saying, well, I would never do that, but I want everybody else to have their choice. That's a wussy way out. Stand up for what you believe. If you think killing babies is wrong, then stand the hell up and say, I'm sick and tired of killing babies. I don't want it anymore. Do you think that out of every 350,000 babies that are killed every year, do you think that one of those might have been a doctor? Do you think one of those might have been a president or a governor or a senator or a researcher that might have cured cancer? And God keeps sending him and he keeps getting aborted? Sad. You need to take, if you believe that abortion under any circumstance is okay, you need to go back and rethink your situation. It's not okay. I don't care what your pastor says. I don't care what you think the Bible says. I don't care what the government says. I don't care what your doctor says. I don't care what anybody says. You go read your Bible. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah, if there was no place else in the Bible, and there is many, many places, but if there was no place else in the Bible, God says very plainly what the outcome for homosexuals is. It's death. If you think that killing babies is good, you need to go back and check your Bible. God called killing babies an abomination. The outcome's death. You need to go check yourself. You need to re-examine your views, and you need to get off of the left's abortion train. The time has come when we as Americans, not Republicans and not Democrats, as Americans, I always thought that like-minded or even unlike-minded people, we can sit down and have some agreements. Life is good, death is bad. Life is good, murder is bad. I mean, can't we agree on that? If we can't agree on that, we're sunk. If we agree that murder is bad, is there different degrees of murder? Now, legally there is, but it's still murder. If you consciously, with a forethought, and plan and pay for and go to the trouble of recovering from the murder of a baby, that is premeditated murder. What's the sentence for premeditated murder in your state? I don't know. 15 years to life? If you plan in advance to kill your baby, that's premeditated murder. At what point did that become okay to kill a baby or kill a human being in 9 months, and then in your mind, now it's not okay after 9 months? Unless you're the governor of Virginia, and then it's 9 months plus 2 or 3 days. At what point did that become okay? Come on. Wake up and use your head. One of the reasons I want to aim this directly at millennials, because millennials is the first generation that the really indoctrination of our education system has happened. They're the first ones to come out. If you doubt me, look at the research. I just heard this morning, 47% of all millennials in this country want to live in a socialist or communist country. How did that happen? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Capitalism is the only form in the history of man anywhere in the world that has lifted people out of poverty. Socialism and communism makes everybody worse off. Everybody. Except the people in the government. Look at Venezuela. Look at Cuba. Look at China. Look at Russia. Look at Iraq. Look at Iran. The only people doing well in those countries are the people in the government. Everybody else sucks. The United States is the only place in the world under capitalism where, like right now, the rising tide lifts all boats. So when millennials come out, not only do they want socialism, which is what the left wants, they also believe in homosexual marriage. Vast majority of them are pro-homosexual marriage, which is what the left is. The vast majority are pro-choice, which is what the left is. That's not an accident. They have been indoctrinated not to independently think on their own, but to regurgitate what they've been taught to make believe is right. I'm asking you critical questions. At what point did you wake up and decide, hey, in this time frame, it's okay to premeditate and murder a baby? At what point did you make that decision? You obviously made it somewhere. Start to think critical. And this abortion is a good case example to critically think about your decision and how you got to make that decision. Well, as I said, that's the only issue I wanted to talk about this week. Next week, we're probably going to have a potpourri. We're going to start a new series on another show that I do. I want to go over that, some of the annual programs that we do, and then whatever news issues we have. So next week is probably going to be a multi-issue show, but I didn't want to clutter this week up. I wanted to spend a lot of time on abortion. And if you get nothing else out of this, I just hope that you will sit down and try to examine your positions and try to justify your position. Well, that's it for the program, guys. We'll talk to you next week. I look forward to next week when we can sit down and talk about this week in politics.